The playground was buzzing. Basketballs thudded against concrete. Laughter bounced between the chain-link fences. But in a shadowy corner near the bike racks, time was slowing down. Jaden Carter stood with his back to the wall, clutching his lunch tray like it was a shield. His wide brown eyes flicked between the towering figure in front of him and the growing crowd behind. "You think you're smart, huh?" Chase Whitmore sneered. His designer sneakers, white with gold trim, stood out like they didn't belong in a middle school. He stepped closer, jabbing a finger into Jaden's chest. Jaden didn't respond. His jaw tightened. He'd seen this movie before. "Answer me, science boy." Chase's voice was louder now. "You think you're better than me?" Someone pulled out their phone. Another chuckled, "Yo, this, 'bout to go viral." Chase smirked, sensing the attention. His fingers curled into Jaden's shirt collar, and with one swift motion, he shoved. Jaden stumbled backward. His tray clattered to the ground. Mac and cheese splattered across his sneakers. His back hit the pavement hard, a shallow puddle soaking through his hoodie. A hush fell over the crowd, just for a second. Then, laughter. Laughter that echoed like glass breaking in slow motion. Jaden didn't cry. He never cried at school. But inside, something cracked. Chase stepped back, arms raised like a performer who'd just nailed his final act. "Oops," he said. "Gravity must have hit harder than I thought." The bell rang. Kids scattered, some still snickering. Jaden stayed on the ground a beat longer, eyes closed, breathing deep. When he finally stood, wet and shaking, only one person remained nearby, a girl with dark curls and a red hoodie. Emma Rodriguez. She didn't say anything. Just offered him a napkin. He didn't take it. The walk home was quiet. Jaden kept his head down, ignoring the buzz of notifications pinging from classmates' phones. He knew what they were watching. What they were sharing. His humiliation had gone digital. He turned the corner to their small two-bedroom apartment, tucked behind a gas station and a taqueria. A modest place, but warm. Home. Inside, the smell of leftover chili greeted him. His mom's shoes were by the door, she must be on break between hospital shifts. Jaden tossed his backpack onto the couch and headed to the bathroom to wash up. His reflection in the mirror stared back at him, mud-streaked cheeks, a busted lip, and defeat in his eyes. He scrubbed harder than usual. "Jay," his mom called from the kitchen. "You okay, baby?" "I'm fine," he lied. She paused. "What happened to your hoodie?" He froze. "Fell. At recess." She poked her head around the corner, her curly hair in a loose bun, eyes tired but sharp. "You fell, huh?" He nodded. "It's no big deal." She didn't press. Just said, "Dinner in 5." Later that night, Jaden sat at his desk in the corner of their shared room. He'd changed into his favorite NASA hoodie, frayed at the cuffs, but comforting. On the desk, pieces of his home-built robot sat in quiet disassembly. His fingers moved almost without thinking, tightening wires, aligning sensors, adjusting code lines on a cracked laptop screen. This was his sanctuary. A world where numbers made sense, and logic ruled. He glanced at the flyer tacked to the wall, National Middle School Science Showcase, apply now. The registration fee was $80. He sighed. Might as well be $8,000. Still, he kept building. Across town, the Whitmore mansion glowed like a cathedral in the night. Marble floors, glass walls, chandeliers that cost more than Jaden's entire apartment building. Chase sat at a dining table the size of a tennis court. His plate of untouched steak bled into expensive porcelain. His father, Malcolm Whitmore, sat at the head of the table, scrolling through news alerts on his phone. "Did you push a kid today?" Malcolm asked, not looking up. Chase flinched. "Who told you that?" Malcolm turned his phone toward him. There was a paused video. The shove. The fall. The laugh. Chase's stomach dropped. "You're trending on TikTok," Malcolm said coldly. "Congratulations." Chase said nothing. "You know how hard I've worked to build this name," Malcolm said, voice rising slightly. "Whitmore Tech is weeks away from finalizing a major government contract. And you, my son, look like a juvenile thug on camera. I was just. Don't speak. Just fix it." That night, Chase lay awake in his king-sized bed, the glow of his phone lighting his face. He scrolled through comments. Rich kid syndrome at its worst. Someone punch him back, please. Protect Jaden at all costs. Jaden's a legend for not reacting. That's real strength. He tossed the phone away. For the first time, Chase felt something heavy creeping into his chest. Back in his room, Jaden finished the last wire. His robot's eyes blinked. It rolled forward. Success. A smile tugged at his lips, but it was brief. A notification popped up on his screen. "You've been tagged in a video, 8,301 views." He clicked. There it was. His fall. Over and over. Cut to music. Memes in the comments. He closed the laptop. Tears pricked at his eyes. He blinked them away. But his fingers still hovered over the keyboard. Then, slowly, he opened a new document. Title: How to Fix the World with One Robot at a Time. He had work to do. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next morning, the bruises on Jaden's elbow had started to bloom a dull purple. He rolled down the sleeves of his hoodie carefully, not wanting his mom to worry. Again. He knew how hard she worked, nights at the emergency room, mornings cleaning dental offices. She didn't need more stress. She was already barely sleeping. The aroma of scrambled eggs and toast drifted from the kitchen. Jaden followed the sound of low R&B humming softly from the radio. "Morning, sleepyhead," his mom said, flipping a pancake with one hand and sipping black coffee with the other. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her name badge slightly bent. "Vanessa Carter, RN." Jaden grunted a sleepy morning, sliding into the chair. She glanced over her shoulder. "You sleep okay?" He shrugged. She turned off the stove, grabbed 2 plates, and sat down beside him. "You sure you're alright, Jay?" "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than he intended. She raised an eyebrow. "Okay, lil' man. You don't have to snap." Jaden exhaled. "Sorry. Just tired." They ate in silence for a moment. The only sound was the gentle clink of forks against plates. Then she said softly, "I saw the video." Jaden stopped chewing. "I know you didn't want me to. But one of the nurses showed me. She thought I'd be proud of how you didn't fight back." She sighed. "And I was. I am. But I'm also mad as hell." Jaden looked down at his plate. "You don't deserve to be treated like that," she continued. "Nobody does. He thinks he's better than everyone," Jaden muttered. "Because his dad's rich. Because he's popular. I don't know." "No," she said. "He thinks he's better because no one's ever told him he's not. But that's not your job, Jay. Your job is to keep shining. Keep building. Keep dreaming so big they can't fit your future into a video." He swallowed the lump in his throat. She reached over, brushing a curl away from his forehead. "You're the strongest kid I know." Jaden didn't say anything. But he felt something shift. Just a little. That afternoon, Jaden sat in the school library, a place where the world quieted. He sat alone at his usual table, surrounded by textbooks, wires, and blueprints. His robot, rebuilt and recharged, sat next to his backpack. "Hey," a voice said. "Emma." Jaden looked up. She wore that same red hoodie, sleeves pushed up, hair tied in a messy bun. There was something unapologetically real about her. "Mind if I sit?" He hesitated, then shrugged. Emma dropped her bag and sat across from him. For a minute, she said nothing. Just looked at the robot. "You rebuilt it," she finally said. "Had to," Jaden replied. "Can't let Whitmore win." Emma cracked a half-smile. "You really going for the science showcase?" "Trying to." He avoided her eyes. "Don't have the money yet. But I'll figure something out. Maybe there's a scholarship." "There is. But it's competitive. They only pick one student per district." Emma leaned in, lowering her voice. "I think you could win it." Jaden looked up, surprised. "Your robot's better than anything I've seen," she added. "And not just because it moves. You made it with, like, recycled parts, right?" He nodded slowly. "Mostly from broken toys, busted printers. Stuff from behind the Goodwill." She whistled. "That's legit impressive." He blushed slightly, hiding it behind a fake cough. Emma glanced down. I wanted to say sorry. For not stepping in yesterday." Jaden's face hardened. "You were there." "I know. And I hate that I didn't do anything." Her voice was sincere, almost trembling. I froze. I felt like if I said something, I'd just make it worse for you. Or get laughed at too. Jaden didn't respond right away. "I'm not proud of it," she whispered. He met her eyes. And for the first time that day, the wall he'd built cracked just a little. "It's okay," he said. "You're here now." They sat there for a few seconds, a truce silently agreed upon. Later that evening, Jaden sat cross-legged on the carpet at home, tinkering with his robot. The apartment was quiet, his mom was working the night shift again. The only light came from the flickering lamp beside him. He flipped open his notebook, sketches, schematics, lists of coding bugs. At the top of one page, a single phrase was underlined 3 times, "Build something that helps people." He thought about his mom, her tired eyes, the way she always smiled even when she didn't have to. He thought about Emma, brave enough to admit fear. He thought about Chase, and how someone with everything could still feel so empty that hurting others became entertainment. Jaden's fingers tightened on the screwdriver. "He won't win," he whispered. "Not in the way that mattered." Across town, in a house big enough to have its own elevator, Chase sat alone in his room. His phone buzzed beside him, but he didn't pick it up. Group texts. Memes. A few "LOL you are wild bro" messages. And a dozen others telling him to delete his account. He scrolled through them all. Then paused at one message. It was from someone he didn't know. "You think you're tough because you shoved a kid? Real tough guys don't need to put others down." Chase stared at it for a long time. For once, he didn't feel tough. He felt small. Meanwhile, Jaden closed his notebook and stood up. He looked around the apartment, quiet, humble, filled with the scent of lavender and ambition. He walked to the window and opened it. The cool night air brushed against his face. Somewhere deep inside, a new thought stirred. Not just revenge. Not even redemption. But purpose. And maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. The Whitmore estate looked more like a luxury hotel than a home. Tucked behind manicured hedges and iron gates, it sprawled across 2 acres of marble driveways, private tennis courts, and a glistening pool that had its own pool house. Inside, everything gleamed. White floors. Glass walls. Furniture that belonged in magazines, not a home. But it all felt cold. Chase Whitmore leaned on the marble kitchen island, swirling orange juice in a crystal glass. The digital clock on the stainless steel oven blinked, 6:37 a.m. Across from him, the personal chef, Chef Marco, folded omelets with mechanical precision. "Your father called," Marco said without looking up. Chase didn't respond. He didn't have to. He already knew. And? Chase finally muttered. "He's on his way back from DC conference, went late. He'll be home for dinner tonight." Shocker. Chef Marco raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He'd been in the house long enough to know the rules: stay quiet, stay efficient, stay invisible. Chase grabbed the omelet off the plate, didn't say thank you, and left. His driver, Julian, was already waiting in the car. Black SUV. Tinted windows. The kind of vehicle people either admired or feared. As Chase slid into the back seat, he unlocked his phone. He'd gained 3,000 new followers overnight, and about 600 furious comments. "Rich punk energy. Hope that kid sues you. Money can't buy respect." Chase scrolled without expression. He didn't care what they said. At least, that's what he told himself. Julian glanced at him through the mirror. "Rough morning?" Chase looked up, surprised by the question. "You don't talk much," Julian added. "But you look. I don't know. Off." Chase gave a forced smirk. "You ever get tired of pretending?" Julian paused. "Pretending what?" "That everything's fine. That people actually care about who you are and not what you can give them." Julian nodded slowly, then turned his eyes back to the road. "More than you know." Chase didn't say anything for the rest of the ride. At school, Chase stepped out of the SUV with his usual swagger. Students glanced his way, but it wasn't admiration anymore. Not after the video. He passed a group of 8th graders who whispered and snickered. He caught a few words: tick-tock, shove, karma. He clenched his jaw and walked faster. First period was social studies. Mr. Halpern. A teacher who hated late homework and loved PowerPoints. Chase slid into his seat. Everyone's eyes were on him, except one. Jaden sat 2 rows ahead, head down, scribbling notes. Like the shove never happened. Like Chase didn't exist. It annoyed him more than the stares. By lunch, the isolation was unbearable. He sat alone. For the first time ever. His old crew, Liam, Jared, and Connor, had taken another table. They'd laughed with him yesterday, but today? They avoided eye contact. He poked at his food. Fancy grilled chicken sandwich. Imported apple slices. Probably made by Chef Marco and packed by the maid. He didn't take a single bite. That night, back at the estate, dinner was set for 2. A long mahogany table with silverware too polished to touch. Mr. Whitmore walked in precisely at 7 p.m., suit jacket still on, Bluetooth headset blinking in his ear. "Chase," he said, not unkindly, but distantly. "We need to talk." Chase looked up from his untouched plate. "About the video," his father continued. "It's bad press. For you and for the company." "I know." Malcolm Whitmore took a deep breath, sat down, and removed the earpiece. "That alone was rare. I didn't build a billion-dollar empire just for my son to throw it away over playground politics." Chase stiffened. It wasn't politics. He was mouthing off. "Who? The other boy?" "Yeah. Jaden." Malcolm narrowed his eyes. "The scholarship kid?" Chase blinked. "What do you mean?" Malcolm sipped his wine, setting the glass down with a soft clink. "The one from the underprivileged science program?" "Yes, I've read about him. Sharp kid. His mom works nights at the hospital." Single parent. Story practically writes itself. Chase's stomach turned. You're lucky his mother hasn't lawyered up, Malcolm continued. We have PR damage control already in motion, but I need you to do something. Chase waited. You're going to write an apology. Public. Authentic sounding. Chase laughed bitterly. So it's not about what I did. Just how it looks. Malcolm didn't answer. He didn't have to. That was the answer. That night, Chase couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, at least, not entirely. But because something his dad said kept echoing in his head. The story practically writes itself. He wasn't the story anymore. Jaden was. And it ate him alive. In his room, surrounded by expensive things he never asked for, custom gaming rig, gold-plated headphones, designer posters, Chase sat at his desk. He clicked open a blank Word doc titled, Apology Draft. He stared at the screen. Nothing came out. Because deep down, he didn't feel sorry. He felt confused. Angry. Small. He wasn't supposed to be the villain. He was the one on top. The one built for success. He was the son of a billionaire. So why did it suddenly feel like he was losing? Across the city, Jaden was putting the finishing touches on his scholarship essay. He didn't write about Chase. He wrote about his mother. About building robots from trash. About how science gave him control when life didn't. And about how the world didn't need more people with money, it needed more people who cared. Two boys. Same city. Same grade. Worlds apart. But their paths were no longer parallel. They were about to collide, again. And this time, the fallout would be bigger than a push in the dirt. It was Thursday, and for the first time all week, Jaden didn't dread going to school. Not because things were better. Not because the whispers had stopped. But because of her. Emma didn't try to fix things. She didn't say, "It'll be okay," in that fake voice adults used when they had no idea what to say. She just showed up. Every day since the video, she'd sit with him in the library during lunch. No big speeches. No pity in her eyes. Just her presence, steady like a lighthouse in the middle of chaos. That mattered more than he could say. Today, she brought a sandwich and 2 sodas in her beat-up backpack. "Hope you're not allergic to peanut butter," she said, sliding one across the table. Jaden smiled. "I mean, if I die, at least I won't have to take the math quiz." She snorted. "Good point." They ate quietly for a while, the clinking of soda cans and the occasional page flip breaking the silence. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said suddenly. Jaden looked up. "What's your robot actually do? Like, besides looking cool?" Jaden lit up a little. "Right now, it just moves. But I'm working on this feature where it detects motion, like if someone falls, and sends a signal to a phone app. It could be useful for elderly people who live alone." Emma blinked. "Whoa. That's really smart." He shrugged, but his chest warmed at the compliment. "I figure, if I can make something useful, people will care more about that than some stupid video of me getting pushed." Emma nodded slowly. "You know what's wild? You actually think like that. Most kids would be plotting revenge, or crying, or both." Jaden smiled sideways. "Doesn't mean I haven't thought about revenge." "Oh yeah? What's the plan?" "Replace Chase's hair gel with superglue." Emma nearly spit out her soda laughing. "Now that I would pay to see." They laughed together, and for a second, everything felt normal. After school, Jaden and Emma walked toward the bike racks together. She lived just a few blocks from him, something they'd never realized before. As they turned the corner, a group of kids passed them, whispering and laughing. "Robot boy got himself a girlfriend," one of them muttered. Jaden froze. His stomach dropped. Emma's face flushed. Ignore them. But Jaden couldn't. The words hit too close to home. Memories of being singled out. Laughed at. Labeled. He slowed down, suddenly distant. Emma noticed. Hey. Don't let them get in your head. It's not just that, he said quietly. They always do that. They see me with anyone and assume it's something weird. Like I'm not allowed to just have friends. Emma walked beside him in silence for a few steps. Then she said something that stuck with him. You're allowed to be happy, Jay. Even if the world doesn't give you permission. He looked at her, surprised by the weight of her words. She shrugged. My older brother used to say that. Before he moved out. Jaden didn't ask more, but he remembered it. They reached Emma's street. She gave a small wave, then said, Tomorrow's Friday. That means pizza in the library. I'm buying. You're bringing sarcasm and nerd facts. He grinned. Deal. That night, Jaden sat by his bedroom window, legs tucked up under his hoodie, robot beside him like a silent pet. The city buzzed beyond the glass. Sirens. Distant traffic. A dog barking somewhere. But in his little corner of the world, there was only stillness. He picked up his journal, a beat-up composition notebook with circuit diagrams scribbled in the corners, and flipped to a fresh page. He started writing. Things I know so far. 1. Chase isn't sorry. 2. The internet forgets fast, but people at school don't. 3. Emma might be the best person I know. 4. Robots are easier to fix than feelings. 5. I still want to win the scholarship. Badly. He paused, then added. 6. Maybe I'm not completely alone. Meanwhile, in the Whitmore mansion, Chase sat at the edge of his bed, staring at a glowing laptop screen. His drafted apology was still blank. His dad had texted twice. Where's the statement? Don't make me handle this for you. But Chase wasn't thinking about the apology. He was watching something else. A video clip of Jaden, from weeks ago. Someone had filmed him in the science lab, working on his robot. The kid looked so focused, like he belonged in a different world entirely. A world Chase didn't understand. The clip ended, and Chase closed the laptop. Something inside him was changing. Shifting. He didn't know what it was. But it scared him. The next day, Jaden arrived at the library to find Emma already waiting. On the table were 2 slices of pizza, a Sprite, and a napkin with her doodles all over it, tiny stick figures, robots, and speech bubbles. Warning, she said as he sat down. I've already eaten 1 slice, and I may steal yours if it looks better. He laughed. Try me. They ate, laughed, and for the first time in a long time, Jaden felt like he was allowed to just be a kid. No labels. No hashtags. No bruises that needed hiding. Just 2 friends. A table. And echoes of silence finally filled by something good. It was Monday morning, and Jaden's hands were shaking. Not from fear. From possibility. He stood outside the school counselor's office, clutching the email printed in black and white, like it was a golden ticket. He'd read it 10 times already. Congratulations. You've been selected as a finalist for the 8th grade Innovators STEM Scholarship. We were inspired by your creativity, perseverance, and passion for community impact. We look forward to meeting you in person for your final interview next week. Jaden stared at the words like they might vanish if he blinked too hard. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. Ms. Tanner, the school counselor, was already waiting with a big smile and a folder labeled STEM finalist, Jaden Carter. I knew it, she said, beaming. I knew your robot was special. Jaden smiled sheepishly. I thought the app part was kinda glitchy. Doesn't matter. What matters is that your story is strong. You've overcome more than most adults, and you're using your brain to build solutions. That's exactly what these judges look for. Jaden shifted in his seat. There's an interview, right? Next Friday, she said. Downtown. Dress nice. Be confident. Be you. He nodded slowly, the weight of it all starting to settle in his chest. She leaned forward. Jaden, this could open doors. You win this, you're not just getting the scholarship. You'll be on their radar. Summer programs. Internships. Maybe even full rides to high school STEM academies. His heart thumped. He could feel it, the horizon inching closer. Real. Tangible. Like maybe, just maybe, he could break free from the cycle. After school, Jaden ran the whole way home. He burst through the apartment door. Mom, he shouted. His mom, mid-nap on the couch, sat up with a start. What's wrong? I made it. I'm a finalist for the scholarship. She blinked twice, then stood. Say it again. I made it. She screamed. Boy, you better stop playing with me. Jaden laughed so hard he nearly dropped the paper. Vanessa snatched the printout, scanning it with trembling fingers. Oh my God, she whispered. Jaden. Tears welled in her eyes. And for a moment, the fatigue vanished from her face. Replaced by something deeper than joy. Pride. They hugged, and Jaden buried his face into her shoulder. She whispered, I always knew. I always knew. Meanwhile, across town in an office full of glass and quiet power, Malcolm Whitmore was reviewing his son's school files. Academic scores. Disciplinary notes. A recent flagged report, video incident, bullying complaint, pending response. He sighed heavily. Sir, his assistant poked her head in. Just got confirmation. The Innovators STEM board finalized their top picks. You asked to be notified. He nodded. And? Jaden Carter. One of the finalists. Malcolm's jaw clenched. That's the boy from the video? Yes. He turned his chair slowly, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window over the city skyline. Any ties to our competitors? None that we know of. But, his story's gaining traction online. A few parenting blogs picked up the clip. Malcolm's voice dropped low. We need that narrative to disappear. Or be rewritten. The assistant hesitated. You want me to suggest a substitution? Malcolm didn't turn around. He didn't have to. That night, Chase sat on the couch, controller in hand, video game paused on the screen. He couldn't focus. His dad had barely spoken a word to him in days. Dinner was silence. The apology draft still untouched. And then, as he sipped from a soda, Malcolm walked in and tossed a file onto the table. What's this? Chase asked. Your new opportunity, Malcolm said. We're getting you nominated for the same scholarship. Chase's eyes narrowed. What? But I didn't apply. You're going to, Malcolm said flatly. You're going to write a last-minute essay. We'll cover the submission fee. Our people will help with edits. But it's for innovators. I didn't build anything. You don't need to build, Malcolm said, voice colder now. You just need to sell. Chase stared at the folder. This is about the other kid, isn't it? He said. His father looked at him sharply. You're trying to erase what happened. Replace him with me. Control the narrative, Malcolm said. That's how you win. Not just in business, but in life. Chase swallowed hard. He felt like a puppet being handed a new script. He nodded slowly. But something inside him twisted. He wasn't sure he could live with this one. The next day at school, Emma found Jaden in the library. "I heard," she said, breathless. "Finalist?" "Jaden, that's huge." He grinned. "I know, right? I actually feel like." But then he stopped. Emma followed his eyes to the poster on the library board. New finalist added, Chase Whitmore. Her smile faded. Jaden stared at the name, his heart sinking. "No way," he said. "That's not possible." Emma whispered, "He didn't even enter." Jaden's joy drained like water from a cracked bucket. He didn't need to say it. They both knew what it meant. This wasn't about talent. It was about influence. That night, Jaden sat at his desk, the robot blinking softly beside him. He opened his notebook. Flipped to a clean page. And wrote just one word at the top. Fight. Because if they thought he'd just roll over and let them steal this too, they were in for a surprise. Jaden couldn't sleep. It was almost midnight, and the city outside his window pulsed with distant sirens and the low hum of cars, but all he could hear was the name. Chase Whitmore. How did someone with zero interest in robotics suddenly end up a finalist? How did he, the kid who shoved Jaden in front of half the school, get placed beside him on a list that was supposed to recognize integrity, impact, and innovation? Jaden sat at his desk, flipping through the scholarship website on his mom's old laptop. The page was updated. Finalist number 7, Chase Whitmore. Proposed project, digital assistant for student mental health. Status, essay under review. Jaden's eyes narrowed. A mental health assistant? From the guy who bullied him? Give me a break, Jaden muttered. He clicked the link, no project photo, no prototype. Just a 2-sentence summary. That's when something clicked. Every other finalist had uploaded videos, diagrams, or app screenshots. Even Jaden had submitted a sketch and short demo video. But Chase? Nothing. It smelled wrong. Really wrong. The next morning, Jaden caught up with Emma in the hallway before homeroom. "I need your help," he said. "With what?" "I think Chase's finalist spot is fake." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You think he cheated?" "No, not him. His dad. You saw that project description. It's like ChatGPT wrote it at 3 a.m. Emma smirked. "True. I've written better stuff half asleep with a Cheeto in my mouth." Jaden handed her a printed list. "Can you help me cross-reference the judging panel? Names, connections. Anything that might link them to Whitmore Tech." Emma took the paper, nodding. "You want receipts? I'll get receipts." And just like that, their science project partnership turned into a full-blown investigation. Meanwhile, Chase sat in his dad's downtown office, sleek, silver, and soul-sucking. "You meet with the STEM interview board next Tuesday," Malcolm Whitmore said, flipping through Chase's revised essay like it was a quarterly report. "Wear a suit. Don't slouch. And for God's sake, don't mention anything about that video." Chase stared at the floor. "I didn't earn this," he muttered. "What was that?" Malcolm said without looking up. "I said I didn't earn this." Malcolm put down the paper, his expression hard. "You think the world is fair, son? That it gives people what they deserve? No. It gives power to people who take it." Chase stood, fists clenched. "You don't care about me. You care about erasing that video. You care about your brand. I care about your future," Malcolm snapped. "Which, with or without your permission, I'm protecting." Chase walked out without another word. For the first time, he wasn't just uncomfortable. He was ashamed. Back at school, Emma worked fast. In the computer lab, she pulled up LinkedIn profiles, company bios, and local press releases. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. One name on the judging panel stood out, Eleanor Denton, STEM board chair. A quick search pulled up more than she expected. Denton Foundation announces new joint venture with Whitmore Tech. Emma stared at the screen. There it was. Strings. Pulled. By lunch, Jaden was already waiting in the library, robot beside him, bouncing his leg nervously. Emma came in, holding a printout like it was a smoking gun. Eleanor Denton. STEM board chair. Guess what else she is? Jaden leaned forward. VP of the Denton Foundation, which just launched a joint initiative with Whitmore Tech last month. Jaden's stomach dropped. You serious? Emma nodded. It's all here. Press release. Photos. And guess who cut the ribbon at the ceremony? She flipped the page. There, in full color, was Malcolm Whitmore, shaking hands with Eleanor Denton. Jaden stared at the image, anger blooming behind his eyes. So this is how they do it, he said. This is how people like him always win. Emma leaned closer. What are you gonna do? Jaden didn't answer right away. He glanced at his robot, then at the open scholarship page on the screen. I'm going to beat him. Not just with code. But with truth. That night, Jaden created a new folder on his laptop. /operation_clarity/. Inside it. Screenshots of the scholarship site. The press release. Public board member bios. A timeline. He wasn't out to expose Chase. But he was going to protect his own shot. He was going to prove that what he built mattered more than a name or a handshake. Across the city, Chase sat in his room, staring at a blank page. The revised essay his dad had forced him to submit was technically fine. But it wasn't his. He had one tab open to a file labeled Jaden_Carter_video.mp4. He hovered over the delete button. Then paused. Instead, he opened a new document. And for the first time in days, he typed something real. I didn't earn this spot. Someone else did. And I need to say something before it's too late. He hit save. Not send. Not yet. But it was a start. Friday morning. Overcast sky. The kind of gray that pressed down on your shoulders. But for Jaden Carter, the world felt brighter. He walked through the school doors with a purpose. Backpack slung high, sneakers scuffed, robot prototype tucked safely into a custom padded case that his mom sewed by hand from an old couch pillow. It was crooked and lopsided, but perfect. Today was the prep day. The STEM Innovators Showcase was just a week away. Each finalist was expected to present their project in front of a judging panel, local media, and a few hundred guests. A stage. A mic. A spotlight. Jaden had never been more terrified, or more ready. During third period, Miss Tanner pulled him aside into her office. She wore a huge grin and held a schedule printed in blue and gold. Guess what, superstar? Jaden raised an eyebrow. You've been chosen to open the showcase next Friday. First presenter. Jaden's heart skipped. Me? But, why me? Because your essay hit every note, she said. You weren't just talking tech. You talked about purpose. Community. Grit. He blinked. You've got the it factor, Jaden, she added. Now all you have to do is show up and be exactly who you are. At lunch, Emma found him by the robotics table, stuffing wires into a control board like a mad scientist. You're glowing, she said, plopping down beside him. I opened the showcase, he said, voice low, like he still couldn't believe it. Emma's mouth fell open. You're going first. That's huge. Yeah, and kinda terrifying. You'll crush it, she said. Then, teasing, unless your robot sets the fire alarm off again. That was one time, Jaden laughed. And technically it was your bagel that caused the smoke. Emma held up her hands in mock surrender. That afternoon, in the Whitmore mansion, Chase sat at the grand piano he never played. His laptop open. The file titled, Confession, Draft, glowed on the screen. He hovered over it again. Delete. Send. Delete. Send. His finger trembled. A knock at the door broke the silence. It was Julian, the family driver, but more of a shadow these days. Your father wants to see you in the conference room. Now. Chase nodded. When he entered the glass-walled room, Malcolm Whitmore was waiting with two men in suits, both reviewing documents on sleek iPads. Sit, Malcolm said. We're reviewing showcase logistics. One of the men looked up. Your application raised a few eyebrows. No prototype listed. No pitch deck. No live demo scheduled. Malcolm cut in before Chase could respond. All being finalized this weekend. We'll have something competitive ready by Monday. Chase looked at his father. You're going to make it for me. Malcolm didn't flinch. You're not the builder. You're the face. The words echoed. Not the builder. Just the face. Meanwhile, back in the city's public library, Jaden and Emma were uploading files for his presentation when Emma's phone buzzed. She checked it, and froze. Jaden. He looked up. She held the screen toward him. A Reddit post. A leaked video. Title, STEM finalist. This kid got pushed around by a rich bully and now they're competing. It was the video. The one of Jaden getting shoved into the dirt by Chase. Posted again. With over 20,000 views, and counting. Jaden's heart dropped into his shoes. The comments were brutal. No way this poor kid stands a chance now. Nepotism is undefeated. They're just using him for PR, he'll never win. Emma whispered, who the heck re-uploaded this? Jaden stared at the screen, fists clenched. I don't know, but they picked the perfect moment to do it. By evening, Jaden's inbox was flooded. Anonymous messages. Mocking gifs. Fake support followed by JK replies. The worst part? A few local media accounts picked it up too. Spinning it into a David vs. Goliath headline, but framing Jaden as the sympathy story, not the talent. He felt sick. He turned off the screen. Sat in silence. And didn't speak for an hour. Across town, Chase sat in his dark room, reading the same post. He knew the username that leaked it. It wasn't him. But it was someone from his side of the internet. One of those rich kid, inside joke Reddit accounts he used to follow without thinking twice. Now. He felt like someone poured acid in his gut. He opened his draft again. Typed something new at the top. I never expected to be a finalist. And honestly, I don't deserve it. I didn't build anything. I didn't apply. I was handed this. He paused. Then added. But I know someone who did. And they're being disrespected every step of the way. Jaden spent the rest of the evening building in silence. He added new sensors to the robot. Tightened the frame. Reran the app prototype. He needed to remember why he started. Not for attention. Not for sympathy. For people like his mom. People who fall, and don't have anyone to catch them. By midnight, both boys stared at screens. One writing. One coding. Both carrying storms in their chests. And neither of them knowing that the real explosion was just around the corner. Monday morning. Jaden didn't want to get out of bed. Not because he was tired. Or sick. Or even scared. But because he was furious. The video leak had taken over the weekend. Every student at Jefferson Middle had seen it, again. Except this time, it wasn't just about the shove. It was about the scholarship. About the fight between the kid from the projects and the billionaire's golden boy. And they all had an opinion. Jaden barely made it 5 steps into the school hallway before he heard. He's just using the video to get sympathy votes. Did you hear his mom called the school? No way he actually wins. They don't want drama. By second period, he stopped trying to block it out. That afternoon, Vanessa Carter stormed through the school doors like a thundercloud wrapped in a denim jacket. She didn't have a scheduled meeting. She didn't care. "Where's the principal?" she said to the front desk. The secretary looked up, startled. "Ms. Carter, is there a... I got one son, one shot, and y'all let this happen twice. First, you stay quiet about him getting shoved. Now someone leaks the video again right before he's supposed to present his scholarship project." The secretary reached for the phone. "I'll page Principal Hastings." Vanessa didn't wait. "Do that. And tell him to come with answers." In the office, Jaden sat beside his mother as Principal Hastings adjusted his tie uncomfortably. "We're looking into the source of the video post, Ms. Carter. It's hard to prove who re-uploaded it. Reddit accounts can be anonymous." "You telling me a middle school has no digital security?" she snapped. "That someone can humiliate my son again, and all you got is a shrug." Hastings shifted. "We're also talking with the Innovators program to make sure the panel remains unbiased." "Unbiased?" Jaden finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "You're kidding, right? One of the judges literally partners with Chase's dad's company." The room went still. Hastings blinked. "How do you know that?" Jaden and Vanessa just looked at him. He didn't answer. Didn't have to. Meanwhile, in the Whitmore mansion, Chase stood at the edge of the cliff. The send button stared back at him. His draft was finished. Raw. Honest. Dangerous. It named names. Described how his father got him in. How he'd been silent for too long. Chase's finger hovered. And then. His bedroom door creaked open. "Malcolm. I just got a call from the board," he said. "They've moved your interview to this Thursday. They're interested in your unique perspective." Chase looked at him. "They don't care what I say. You already bought my way in." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "Don't confuse guilt with weakness." "I'm not weak," Chase said. "No. You're naive." Malcolm walked over, placed a hand on his son's shoulder like a vice grip. "You step out of line now. You burn down everything." Chase looked away. He didn't hit send. Not yet. Later that evening, Jaden sat at his desk, exhausted, eyelids heavy. His robot sat quietly beside him. Then, ping. An email. From STEM Innovators Committee. Subject, update regarding finalist presentations. He clicked, heart pounding. "Dear Jaden. We understand recent events have caused confusion. In light of new information, the showcase order has been adjusted. You will now present second. Chase Whitmore will open the event." Jaden blinked. His jaw clenched. They were protecting him. Giving Chase the opening slot, the spotlight, the narrative control. Emma texted 5 seconds later. "You see this?" Jaden replied. "They want him to lead the story. Not me." "Emma. Then we take it back. Your project. Your voice. Your story. Let's hit harder." Collision. Jaden stared at her words. And he realized something. They could move his slot. They could leak his past. They could whisper and spin and edit all they wanted. But they couldn't control what he said when he had the mic. Across town, Chase was sitting in the same stillness. He looked at the draft again. All the words his father would never want the world to read. And for once, he hit print. Not send. Not yet. But close. Tuesday morning. The air was heavy, a blend of crisp fall air and the palpable tension that had been building for days. Jaden's hands trembled slightly as he sat at his kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. The email from the STEM Innovators Committee was still fresh in his mind. Chase Whitmore would open the showcase. And Jaden would go second. It felt like a slap in the face. But he was determined to make it count. He couldn't control what they did, what they decided, or how they spun the story. What he could control, what he could own, was the speech. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. The words that came next had to matter. His mom had gone to work early, leaving Jaden alone. She had told him, earlier, that she'd fight the school administration if she had to. But Jaden knew better than to expect anyone to fight for him. If he wanted this, he had to fight on his own. He leaned in, breathing slowly, and began to type. To whom it may concern. I didn't grow up like the others in this room. I didn't have the luxury of a fancy school or a network of connections. But I did have something more important, a dream. Jaden kept typing. Each word felt like a weight he was willing to carry. He wanted the world to see what was really important, what he had built, not just who he was. Not just where he came from. He smiled as the words began to flow. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was close. Meanwhile, at the Whitmore mansion, Chase sat in his father's study, facing a large mahogany desk, the papers stacked neatly in front of him. The smell of expensive cologne and leather chairs filled the space, but it did little to soothe the knot in his stomach. The printer hummed in the corner, the sound filling the otherwise silent room. His father had left for a meeting, leaving Chase with a rare moment of freedom. The moment he had been waiting for. His draft sat there, glowing on his laptop screen. He stared at the words for what felt like an eternity. The confession. The truth. It was hard to admit, but he couldn't hide forever. The words were raw, and the guilt, well, it was impossible to ignore. Chase, he muttered under his breath, his voice barely above a whisper. He clicked open the file and read it again. I've been given everything in life. The wealth, the fame, the recognition, but I never earned it. The truth is, I was handed everything, including this scholarship. And if it wasn't for my name, I wouldn't even be here. The words hit harder this time. He clicked on the print button. The sound of the printer starting up was both a relief and a finality. There was no turning back now. This was the moment. Later that afternoon, Jaden stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, practicing the speech he had just finished writing. His heart raced as he heard his voice echo back at him. I didn't grow up like the others in this room. I didn't have the luxury of a fancy school or a network of connections. But I did have something more important, a dream. He paused, adjusting his posture, looking at himself in the mirror. He couldn't fake it. His story was not one he could gloss over or water down. It was a story of grit, of struggle, and of overcoming. He began again. Chase, on the other hand, paced back and forth in his bedroom, the confession still in his hand. He looked out the window, but the scenery of his mansion, the manicured lawns, the shiny cars in the driveway, the distant view of the city, didn't offer him any solace. It just reminded him of how far he had gone to cover up who he really was. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The truth felt like a weight that might crush him, but it was one he had to bear. He opened the printer, pulled the pages out, and stared at the raw words in front of him. For the first time in days, he felt a strange kind of clarity. But that clarity came with a price. The following day, Wednesday, arrived too quickly. The atmosphere at Jefferson Middle was electric with anticipation. Students and teachers alike whispered about the showcase, about Jaden and Chase, and the recent drama that had unfolded. Jaden walked down the hall, clutching his robot prototype in his bag, every step measured and deliberate. He was ready for the fight ahead. As he passed the locker room, he caught a glimpse of a familiar face, Emma. "Ready for tomorrow?" she asked, her voice full of confidence. Jaden nodded, though inside, he wasn't sure if he was ready. But he knew he couldn't back down now. Not after everything that had happened. Not after everything he had worked for. "I guess so," he said, managing a smile. Emma grinned. "You've got this, Jay. You've always had this." Later that afternoon, Chase sat in his father's office, the two of them facing each other across the desk. Malcolm leaned forward, scanning the papers Chase had printed. "You're sure about this?" Malcolm asked, his voice low and cold. Chase nodded. "Yeah. You think they'll just let you in like this? You think you can ruin your chance at everything, Chase?" his father warned. "I think I'm done pretending," Chase replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, quietly, he added, "Do what you want. But if you do this, don't expect anyone to help you when it all comes crashing down." Chase didn't respond. He didn't need to. That evening, Jaden sat on his bed, reviewing his notes one last time. The speech was perfect. His project was ready. The only thing left was the moment itself. But deep down, he knew something had to give. He had fought too hard for too long, and there was no turning back now. Thursday morning. The day had finally arrived. Jaden stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie, his reflection staring back at him with a blend of determination and unease. The noise in his head was deafening, the doubts, the insecurities, the weight of expectations. But he kept his focus. He couldn't afford to let anything distract him now. Today wasn't just a presentation. It was his moment. A loud knock on the bathroom door broke his concentration. "Jaden, you okay in there?" His mom's voice came through, calm yet tinged with concern. "I'm good," he called back. Just, giving myself a pep talk." Vanessa's laugh floated through the door. "You've got this, baby. You've been preparing for this for months. I know you're nervous, but that's just because you care. And that's exactly why you're gonna knock Em out today." Jaden nodded to himself, even though his mom couldn't see him. She had a way of making him feel like he could do anything, but today was different. Today was bigger than any project he'd ever worked on. This wasn't just about a robot, a prototype, or a scholarship, it was about proving that he belonged. That he wasn't going to be defined by the color of his skin, the neighborhood he grew up in, or the people who tried to push him down. After one last deep breath, Jaden grabbed his bag and walked downstairs, where his mom was waiting by the door, holding her keys in one hand and her phone in the other. "You ready?" she asked, giving him a tight smile. Jaden nodded, feeling the weight of her gaze. "Yeah, let's go." Chase, on the other hand, felt like the world was closing in on him. His father's words were still ringing in his ears as he sat in the back seat of the family SUV, the hum of the engine barely noticeable. The showcase was only a few hours away, but Chase felt more like a passenger in his own life than the driver. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was an alert from his private school chat. "Good luck, Chase. We know you'll win. Trophy." He stared at the message. They know he'll win, of course. Because they all thought he was the perfect candidate. The golden boy. The one who had it all. But in the back of his mind, the weight of his confession, the words he'd printed out last night, pressed down harder with each passing minute. Was he really going to hand over his truth to the panel? To the entire world? It would be the biggest risk of his life. He pulled his phone out and stared at the draft of his speech. He had already decided not to send it, not yet. But it wasn't finished, he hadn't even gone through his interview practice with his father, not like he had planned. He was going in blind, unsure of what to say or how to say it. And what about Jaden? What if everything he said fell flat in front of everyone? What if the panel didn't care? What if his own truth was the very thing that destroyed him? "Chase, you good back there?" his mom's voice cut through his thoughts. "Yeah," he said quickly, tucking his phone into his pocket. "I'm fine." By the time the two teams arrived at the venue, the buzz of anticipation was overwhelming. The large convention hall was packed with families, teachers, and students, all murmuring excitedly about the day's presentations. Jaden and Chase walked into the lobby at nearly the same time, though they didn't acknowledge each other. They were still on separate paths, each one unsure where their story would lead. The judges were seated in front of the stage, pens and notepads at the ready. The crowd settled into their seats, and the lights dimmed. Chase was called up first. He walked to the stage, his feet heavy with every step. The spotlight hit him as he approached the podium, and he cleared his throat, trying to steady his nerves. The audience was silent, waiting for him to speak. He could feel the weight of their eyes on him, the weight of his father's legacy, of the expectations placed on him. For a moment, everything felt surreal. He cleared his throat again. "Good afternoon," Chase began, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm Chase Whitmore. And, today I'm here to share my project on renewable energy. But before I do, there's something I need to say." The room fell silent. Chase paused. He could feel his heart racing. This was it. The truth. He couldn't back down now. "I've been handed everything in my life," he continued, his voice steadier now. "I didn't earn this scholarship. I didn't earn the position I'm in, not really. I was born into privilege. And, well, my family's name opened doors for me. And maybe that's the truth none of us want to talk about." There was a brief pause. A few students whispered among themselves. Chase didn't look at them. He focused on the judges, who were scribbling notes, but he didn't know if they were impressed or disappointed. "I didn't deserve to be here like some of the others do. I don't deserve the applause, the recognition, the praise," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "But maybe I can start earning it now. I can't change my past, but I can try to change the future. And that's why I'm here today. Not because I have the answers, but because I want to find them." He took a deep breath. The weight that had been sitting on his chest for weeks felt a little lighter now. "I hope you'll see that." He stepped back from the podium, his heart still pounding, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something close to peace. Jaden's turn came next. He stepped up to the podium with his robot prototype carefully placed in front of him. His hands were clammy, his nerves were on edge, but he had rehearsed this over and over. He knew what he needed to say. And he knew this wasn't just about a scholarship anymore. This was about his story. He took the microphone, his voice slightly shaky at first, but growing stronger as he continued. "Good afternoon. My name is Jaden Carter, and I'm here to talk about a project I created to help solve one of the biggest issues in our community, access to clean energy. But before I talk about my project, I want to share something with you. Something important." Jaden paused for a moment, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw some familiar faces from school, including a few of the kids who had mocked him and whispered about him just days before. But this time, he didn't flinch. "Some of you might know me as the kid from the wrong side of the tracks. The kid who's not supposed to be here. But here I am. I didn't grow up like some of you. I didn't have the best schools or the best connections. But I had something more important than that, a dream. A dream to make a difference. And that's why I'm standing here today." He looked down at his prototype, his voice gaining strength with every word. "I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. I don't need anyone's pity. What I need is a chance to show that people like me, people from places like mine, can do great things, too." Jaden paused again, letting the words sink in. This wasn't just about the project anymore. This was about showing who he really was. I might not be from the best neighborhood, but I've got something worth fighting for. And that's why I'm here today. To fight for my future. To fight for my community. And to show you that I belong here. As Jaden finished, the room was silent. The judges stared at him, unsure of what to make of the raw honesty he had just put on display. Jaden stood there, heart racing, waiting for the response. For the first time in his life, he wasn't worried about what anyone thought. He had said his truth, and no one could take that away from him. The minutes stretched out like hours as the judges deliberated, their hushed voices barely audible from where Jaden stood at the back of the room. The weight of his words lingered in the air, but it was no longer about the words he had spoken, it was about what was to come. The outcome. The decision. Jaden stood at the far edge of the auditorium, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was on the line. His mom had always told him that the only thing that mattered was how hard you fought. But what if fighting wasn't enough? What if, no matter how much effort you put in, the world still couldn't see you? His fingers fidgeted at his sides, twisting the strap of his bag nervously. He glanced at his watch, 3:15 p.m. The judges had been behind closed doors for what felt like forever. And Chase, he hadn't spoken a word to him since they both finished their presentations. Jaden's eyes flicked over to where Chase stood, talking in hushed tones to his father. The Whitmore patriarch, Malcolm, was in his element, dominating the conversation with his signature charisma. He was gesturing with his hands, as though trying to reassure his son, though the stoic expression on Chase's face suggested he wasn't exactly soaking in the encouragement. Jaden had seen that look before. It was the same one Chase wore when he had to pretend everything was fine, when the weight of expectations, both internal and external, pressed down on him too hard. Chase wasn't just carrying the legacy of the Whitmore name, he was carrying the weight of everyone else's vision for his future. It wasn't hard to imagine how much pressure Chase had been under. The door to the judge's room opened with a quiet creak, and the panel began to file out, their faces unreadable. One of the judges, a woman with short, silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, stepped up to the microphone at the center of the room. "Thank you all for your patience," she said, her voice steady and professional. "We've had a chance to thoroughly review each of the projects, and we're now ready to announce the winners of the Jefferson Middle School STEM Showcase." A wave of excitement washed over the crowd as students shifted in their seats, eager for the verdict. Jaden's heart skipped a beat. The judge paused for a moment, as if weighing her words. "The winner of this year's showcase will be awarded a full scholarship to the Advanced STEM program and a chance to present their work at the National Innovation Conference in Washington, D.C. Jaden felt the air in his lungs freeze. This was it. This was what he had worked for. Everything that had led him to this moment. "We will begin with the second-place finalist," the judge continued, breaking the tension in the room. This individual demonstrated exceptional innovation and a deep understanding of renewable energy solutions. A round of applause for Chase Whitmore. The applause was immediate, loud, and overwhelming. Jaden's stomach churned as he clapped half-heartedly, his eyes darting to where Chase stood, a mixture of relief and frustration on his face. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Jaden could tell that Chase had been expecting more. Chase stepped up to the stage, shaking hands with the judges as they handed him a certificate. His dad, standing in the back of the room, gave him a nod of approval, but Jaden saw the flicker of something else in his eyes, a sense of competition, of entitlement. The judge turned her gaze to the audience, the moment of anticipation stretching to its breaking point. "And now, for the winner," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "The individual who impressed us with not only their technical knowledge but also their passion, dedication, and vision for the future. The winner of this year's STEM showcase is Jaden Carter." The room erupted in applause. Jaden froze for a moment, his heart racing as his name echoed in his ears. Jaden Carter. He was being called to the stage. He blinked, trying to process the words, but all he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. He couldn't move at first, couldn't wrap his mind around what was happening. But then, something clicked. A rush of adrenaline surged through him, and his legs moved before his brain could catch up. He walked toward the stage, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The applause grew louder, more thunderous with every step. Jaden felt the gaze of everyone in the room. He saw the students staring at him, some with surprise, others with admiration. A few faces were clouded with disbelief, some of the kids from his class, the ones who had always viewed him as the other kid, who didn't belong in places like this. But now, as Jaden approached the stage, their expressions shifted. For the first time, they saw him as someone worthy of respect. He reached the podium, where the judge extended a hand to him. "Congratulations, Jaden. Your project was impressive, and your courage to speak your truth about your journey truly stood out. You're an inspiration," she said warmly. Jaden took her hand, the weight of her words sinking in as the crowd continued to cheer. It felt surreal. He had done it. He had won. His mind flashed back to the moment when he'd first held the prototype in his hands, the countless late nights spent refining it, the moments when he almost gave up. But now, here he was, standing in front of a room full of people who saw him not for where he came from, but for what he could achieve. The judge handed him a certificate and a golden medallion, and the lights of the room flashed as photographers took pictures. But through it all, his eyes found Chase's in the back of the room. For a brief second, their gazes locked. Chase's face was unreadable, but something about the way he looked at Jaden made Jaden pause. Was it jealousy? Disappointment? Or maybe, just maybe, there was something else. Some flicker of respect. Jaden took the microphone, and the room grew silent again. I just want to say thank you, he began, his voice cracking slightly. This means everything to me. I didn't get here because of a family name or connections. I got here because I fought for this. Because I believed in myself, even when no one else did. He paused, looking around the room. I grew up in a neighborhood that didn't always make room for people like me. But I'm here now. And I want to tell anyone who feels like they don't belong, like they're not good enough, that you are. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. The words came from somewhere deep inside him, and for the first time, he felt like he was speaking not just to the audience, but to himself. To the younger Jaden, the one who doubted, the one who almost gave up. Thank you, he said again, his voice stronger now. This isn't just for me. This is for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. This is for my family. This is for all of us. The applause grew louder, and Jaden felt a warmth spread through him. It was as if the weight he had carried for so long was finally being lifted. He had made it. And no matter what anyone else thought, no matter what anyone said, he had earned it. Chase sat in his seat, clapping along with the others, but a knot twisted in his stomach. He smiled weakly, his hands cold despite the warmth of the room. This was Jaden's moment, but it wasn't just that. It was a moment of reckoning for him, too. As the cheers died down and the crowd began to disperse, Chase stayed seated. He wasn't sure how to feel. Part of him was relieved that the pressure was finally over, but another part of him wondered if, deep down, he could have been better than this. And for the first time, he wondered what it would be like to own his truth. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following the STEM showcase felt like a blur for Jaden. The excitement of his win, the congratulatory messages flooding his phone, and the relentless questioning from teachers, friends, and even strangers all combined to create a whirlwind that left him a little breathless. But amidst it all, one thought echoed in his mind: this is just the beginning. He had made it, yes. But now, he had to prove that he belonged. Now, he had to show the world that it wasn't just a fluke, that his victory wasn't a one-time thing. For Jaden, the journey ahead wasn't about basking in the glory of his win, it was about what he did with the doors that had opened. And, more importantly, it was about what he could give back. But the aftermath of his victory wasn't just filled with cheers and applause. There was something else, a tension, an undercurrent of unease that Jayden couldn't shake. It wasn't about the spotlight or the media attention. It wasn't even about the people who admired him. It was about Chase. Chase, meanwhile, was struggling to come to terms with his own emotions. The night of the showcase, after the ceremony, he had gone straight home, ignoring calls from his friends, avoiding his dad's congratulatory messages, and retreating to his room. The Whitmore name would continue to open doors for him, but right now, all Chase could think about was Jayden. Chase had always been taught that the world was his oyster. Everything had been handed to him on a silver platter, except, of course, for the weight of expectations that came with it. But when Jayden's name had been called as the winner, something inside Chase had snapped. It wasn't jealousy, not really. It was something far more unsettling. For the first time, Chase questioned everything he had been told. Why should Jayden win? He wondered. He didn't have the connections I do, the privilege of being born into a family with influence and money. But then a different thought followed. Maybe he deserved it. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's time to face the truth. At school, things had shifted. The air was different. The students who once whispered about Jayden now looked at him with newfound respect. They whispered about him in a different way. There were still those who saw him as the underprivileged kid who got lucky, but there were others who admired his tenacity, his brilliance, and the way he carried himself. Jayden had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that success didn't always come from privilege or power, it came from perseverance. But even as Jayden walked down the halls with his head held high, something lingered in the back of his mind. A question he hadn't fully processed yet: what happens when the people who once looked down on you start looking at you like you're a threat? It was in the subtle looks from students who used to mock him, the murmurs he overheard, and, most noticeably, the silence that fell between him and his old friends. He'd grown up with them, but now, he was no longer the same Jayden. He was different, he was a winner. And not everyone was happy about it. One morning, as Jayden walked through the school's front doors, he saw Taylor, a classmate from his robotics club, waiting for him. Taylor had been one of the few who supported Jayden from the start, but even she seemed unsure of how to approach him now. "Hey, Jayden," she said softly, her voice tentative. "Congrats again. I didn't get a chance to talk to you after the showcase." "Thanks," Jayden replied, offering a small but genuine smile. "It's been kind of crazy, honestly. But, I appreciate you supporting me." Taylor nodded, but there was something in her eyes, a mixture of pride and unease. She hesitated, glancing around before continuing. "I'm glad you won," she said, her voice dropping lower. "But there's a lot of people who think you don't deserve it." Jayden's smile faltered. He hadn't expected this, not from Taylor. "You too?" he asked, a slight edge creeping into his voice. "No," she quickly reassured him, shaking her head. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just, people are talking. You know how it is. People can be really weird about stuff like this. Like they think you got lucky, or something." Jayden looked down, rubbing his hand against his jeans. Lucky. That word had haunted him for years. He had worked so hard to get to this point, yet the one thing people kept bringing up was how lucky he was. "I know," he said quietly. "I can't change how people think about me. All I can do is keep pushing forward, right?" Taylor looked at him, her eyes softening. "Right. And I think you're gonna do great things. Just don't let them get to you." Jayden smiled, grateful for the reminder, but deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The more people saw him as an outsider who had somehow made it, the harder it would be to prove that he truly belonged. After school, Jayden received a text message from an unexpected number. It was from Chase. "We need to talk." Jayden stared at the screen for a moment, his stomach doing a flip. What could Chase possibly want to talk about? After the showcase, they hadn't exchanged a single word. There was a part of Jaden that was still uncertain whether Chase was even capable of offering him a genuine conversation, especially after all the tension that had built up between them over the past few months. Jaden typed a quick response. Sure. Where? Behind the school. After 3:30. Later that afternoon, Jaden found himself walking toward the back of the school, where the old oak tree stood, its sprawling branches casting long shadows on the ground. Chase was standing under the tree, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking as uncomfortable as Jaden felt. "Hey," Chase said, his voice guarded. "Hey," Jaden replied, stopping a few feet away. He studied Chase, trying to read his expression, but it was hard to tell what he was thinking. "I wanted to say, well, I guess I just wanted to apologize," Chase began, his gaze drifting away from Jaden's. "For how I acted before. You didn't deserve that." Jaden blinked, taken aback by the sincerity in Chase's voice. "Wait, what? Apologize for what?" "For everything," Chase said, running a hand through his hair. "For the way I treated you. For not respecting you, for making you feel less than. I've been carrying that around for a while now, and I didn't know how to own up to it." Jaden's heart skipped a beat. He had never expected this. Apology. From Chase Whitmore. The last person he thought would admit fault. "You don't have to apologize," Jaden said, shaking his head. "But I appreciate it." Chase looked him in the eye, and for the first time, there was no mask of arrogance or superiority in his expression, just a raw, vulnerable honesty. "Maybe I don't deserve to be in the same category as you," Chase said, his voice quiet. "But I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the showcase. About earning it. I think I need to start figuring out what that means for me." Jaden felt the air between them shift. For a moment it was like they were standing on equal ground, two people facing their own struggles, yet somehow understanding each other better than before. "You've got a long way to go," Jaden said, offering a smile. "But I think you'll figure it out." Chase nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah. Thanks, Jaden. For everything." As they stood there, the weight of their shared experience hung in the air. The path forward was uncertain, but maybe, just maybe, they weren't so different after all. The next few weeks felt like a mix of emotional highs and deep uncertainty. Jaden's life had changed overnight. He was no longer just the kid from the other side of town, he was the STEM showcase winner, and that came with its own set of expectations. Doors had opened, doors he'd never imagined, but as much as he tried to embrace the new opportunities, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was still ahead. Chase's apology had been a turning point, but it didn't magically fix everything. The awkwardness still lingered between them, like a crack in a dam that threatened to burst at any moment. For every moment of clarity and understanding, there were still unspoken words and unhealed wounds. But there was something else Jaden couldn't ignore, something had shifted between him and Chase. Maybe it was the vulnerability that had surfaced during their conversation under the oak tree, maybe it was the understanding that, despite their differences, they were both battling their own inner demons. Either way, it was clear that they were no longer simply enemies, or, at least, not in the way they had been before. It was a chilly Tuesday afternoon when Jaden found himself walking home, his mind lost in a sea of thoughts. He was still mulling over the conversation with his mom the night before, where she had told him that winning wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something bigger. She had made him promise to keep his focus, to not let the attention distract him from what truly mattered. But as he turned the corner, he found himself face to face with someone he hadn't expected to see. "Hey, Jaden," Chase said, leaning against the side of a fence, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his jacket. His expression was guarded, but there was no sign of the smugness that Jaden had once associated with him. "Chase," Jaden said, pausing in his tracks. He had thought he'd seen the last of this interaction for a while. What was Chase doing here, now, on his turf. "Can we talk?" Chase asked, his voice low. Jaden hesitated, looking down at the pavement, then back up at Chase. There was something different about him, something genuine in his eyes. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet uncertainty that Jaden hadn't expected. "Sure," Jaden said, still unsure of what exactly this conversation would bring. He gestured down the street. "You want to walk with me?" "Yeah, that's fine," Chase said, his voice almost sounding relieved that Jaden hadn't shut him down. They started walking side by side, the silence stretching between them like an uncomfortable cord, but neither of them seemed ready to break it just yet. Finally, Chase spoke. "You know, after the showcase, I realized something. I've been trying so hard to live up to everyone else's expectations that I've lost sight of what I actually want. What I'm capable of." Jaden turned his head to look at him, his brows furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" Chase paused, his gaze shifting downward as he kicked a small pebble with his foot. "I'm not just talking about the showcase. I'm talking about everything. The pressure to be perfect, to be this ideal version of who everyone thinks I should be. I've been doing it for so long that I don't even know who I am without that, without the Whitmore name and all the stuff that comes with it." Jaden let that sink in. He knew what it was like to be weighed down by expectations, just in a different way. He had never had the privilege of a name like Whitmore's, but he understood the burden of trying to prove yourself in a world that didn't believe in you. It was exhausting either way. "I get that," Jaden said slowly. "I mean, I've never had what you have. The money, the family name, but I've always had to prove myself. And it's not just one big thing, you know. It's 1,000 little things that pile up and make you feel like you're never enough." Chase nodded, his expression softening. "Exactly. And, for the longest time, I thought winning, getting into the best schools, having the best of everything, would make me feel fulfilled. But now, after everything, after seeing you win, hearing what you said at the showcase, I think I've been chasing the wrong things." Jaden looked at Chase, his expression thoughtful. Could it be? The boy who had tormented him, the one who seemed to have everything, was now grappling with the same insecurities that Jaden had dealt with for years. It was a realization that shook him to his core. "So, what now?" Jaden asked. "What do you want to do about it?" Chase smiled, but it was a small, almost tentative smile. "I'm not sure yet. But I think I want to start by making my own decisions, by doing things that matter to me, not to anyone else." Jaden thought about that. It was a brave thing to admit, and in that moment, he couldn't help but feel a small spark of respect for Chase. The same boy who had once used his privilege to put others down was now taking the first step toward doing things on his own terms. It was more than just an apology, it was a change in perspective. "So, you think you'll keep doing STEM stuff?" Jaden asked, trying to gauge where Chase's head was at. Chase shrugged. "I don't know. I mean, I'm still passionate about it, but I'm not sure if it's just because it's what's expected of me. I might try other things. Explore, you know, who I am outside of the pressure." Jaden smiled. "Well, if you ever want to talk about it, or, I don't know, need help figuring it out, I'm around." Chase looked at him, his eyes searching Jaden's face as though trying to determine whether or not this was a joke. But then, to Jaden's surprise, he nodded. "Thanks, man. I think that's the first time anyone's actually said that to me." Jaden chuckled softly. "Well, you've got to start somewhere." As they continued walking, something shifted between them. No longer was it a rivalry, it was the beginning of an understanding. Chase wasn't asking for Jaden's approval, but there was a newfound respect, something that hadn't existed before. A week later, Jaden found himself back in his old school's gym, but this time, it wasn't for a competition. Instead, he was sitting at a table in front of a group of curious middle school students, explaining his project and how he'd turned his idea into a reality. As Jaden spoke, he noticed someone in the back of the room, Chase, sitting with a few of his friends. They weren't talking much, but every so often, Chase would look up at Jaden, a slight smile on his face. Jaden didn't think much of it at first. It was just another day, another opportunity to show what he was made of. But as the presentation went on, something clicked for Jaden. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about sharing what he knew, showing others that no matter where you came from or what obstacles you faced, you could still make a difference. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of a new kind of friendship. One where both of them, Jaden and Chase, could finally let go of the past and face the future together. Jaden couldn't have known it at the time, but that afternoon, as he stood in front of a group of wide-eyed middle schoolers sharing his story, the first ripple of change began to spread. At the time, it felt like just another day in the grind, a typical school event where he gave a short talk about his STEM project, answered some questions, and then headed back to his routine. But later, as he looked back, he realized how pivotal that moment had been, not just for him, but for everyone who had been watching. The next day, Jaden woke up to a flood of notifications. His social media had exploded with likes, comments, and shares. It wasn't the first time he had gone viral, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just about his win at the showcase, it was about the message he had shared. Incredible, one comment read. Jaden is proof that hard work and determination can get you anywhere. Can't wait to see what he does next. Another comment came from a student he didn't even know. You inspired me to start working on my own project. Thank you for showing us what's possible. And then there was a message from someone that caught his eye. It was from a high school senior named Sophia, someone Jaden had never met. She had seen him speak at the middle school event and was so moved by his words that she reached out to him directly. I'm a senior, and I've been struggling to figure out what I want to do with my life. After hearing you talk yesterday, I finally realized that what I want is to create things that matter. I've been too focused on following the script that everyone else wrote for me, but I think it's time to start writing my own. Jaden stared at the message for a long time, a mixture of pride and disbelief settling in his chest. His story was reaching people. His story. It wasn't just a victory in a robotics competition anymore. It wasn't just about a single moment in time. It was about a movement. A message. A ripple that was growing and expanding, moving far beyond the walls of his school, far beyond the boundaries of his neighborhood. Meanwhile, Chase was experiencing his own form of awakening. He had spent the last few weeks mulling over his conversation with Jaden, and though it had started with an apology, something much deeper had been set in motion. Chase had always felt like he was supposed to follow in his father's footsteps. He had been groomed for success, for legacy, for prestige. But now, he was questioning everything. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had been chasing someone else's dream for far too long. And Jaden, of all people, had shown him that there was another way. It wasn't just about what you did. It was about why you did it. It was about passion. About pursuing something that mattered, something that resonated with your own soul, instead of being pushed into a mold that didn't fit. Chase had always been good at the things that mattered to his family, academics, sports, leadership roles, but he had never felt that deep connection to any of it. It was all just part of the game. The game of status, recognition, and legacy. But now, after everything that had happened, he wasn't sure he wanted to keep playing. He didn't want to continue wearing a mask, pretending that the future his family had mapped out for him was the one he wanted. And it wasn't just the pressure from his family that had started to weigh on him. It was the realization that he didn't really know who he was, who he wanted to be. He had spent so much of his life living up to other people's expectations that he had never taken the time to discover himself. To find his own purpose. 2 weeks later, Chase found himself sitting in the same gym where Jaden had spoken to the middle schoolers. This time, it wasn't just a casual event. Chase had a purpose. After days of internal conflict, he had made a decision. He had asked for permission to come and speak to the group of students who would be attending the next STEM presentation, and, to his surprise, Jaden had agreed. "I never thought I'd be the one up here," Chase said as he stood in front of the group of students, the microphone trembling slightly in hase hand. "But I think I owe it to all of you to be honest about something." He paused, glancing down at the crowd of young faces, some curious, others a little unsure about what to expect from him. They had probably seen him around. He was one of the Whitmore kids, after all. He was supposed to be perfect, right? He was supposed to have everything figured out. "Well," Chase continued, his voice gaining confidence, "I've spent a lot of my life pretending to be someone I'm not. I've been chasing other people's dreams, living according to other people's expectations. And that, well, that didn't feel right. It didn't feel real." He took a deep breath. "But after hearing Jaden speak and realizing how important it is to pursue your own path, I decided it was time to change. I'm here to tell you that you don't have to be anyone but yourself. Don't get caught up in other people's ideas of who you should be. Follow what excites you, what makes you feel alive. That's what I plan to do from now on." Chase smiled as he finished speaking, a quiet but sincere smile. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders, as though saying those words out loud had made them finally real. And then, as the students began to applaud, he looked over to the back of the room where Jaden was standing, leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, a small, approving smile on his face. Chase felt a flicker of something inside him, respect. Not just for Jaden's accomplishments, but for his ability to stay true to himself, to find the courage to push through despite the odds. The ripple effect was already in motion. Jaden's words had reached one person. And that one person, Chase, was now standing in front of a group of kids, trying to pass on the same lesson that had changed his life. And who knew how many more people this new perspective would reach? Jaden's message wasn't just about proving people wrong or rising above adversity. It was about showing others that the world was bigger than the roles they'd been assigned. That there was power in making choices that felt true to who you were, not just what others expected. As Jaden looked at Chase, a sense of fulfillment settled over him. He had always felt like an outsider, like the world had written him off before he could even show what he was capable of. But now, seeing this shift in Chase, seeing someone who had once been his adversary find his own way, he realized that this was what it was all about. Change. The kind that started with one person and then spread, like a ripple in water, touching everyone it encountered. And maybe, just maybe, this was just the beginning. It had been a month since the event at the STEM presentation, and things were starting to feel different. The air around Jaden buzzed with a kind of anticipation, the kind of energy that only came when you felt like something significant was about to happen. It was a strange sensation, a mix of excitement and nerves, but it was also strangely motivating. Jaden had kept his focus on his studies and projects, continuing to pursue the path that had started with the showcase win. His relationships with his classmates had shifted, there was a quiet respect that hadn't been there before, especially after he and Chase spoke up at the event. Even though the social dynamics weren't completely different, there was an unspoken understanding among the students. But as much as Jaden appreciated the changes in how he was viewed, the truth was that the shift had also made him feel more exposed. He was being watched. It wasn't a bad thing, in fact, it was an opportunity. But it was still a heavy feeling, knowing that now people were expecting him to succeed in ways he had never experienced before. The pressure was mounting, and while Jaden had always thrived under pressure, this felt different. This wasn't just about doing well in school or impressing a teacher. This was about changing the narrative of who he was, not just to his peers, but to himself. Chase had felt it too. The day after he'd spoken at the STEM event, he found himself lying in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The speech had been a success. People had clapped, they'd listened, they'd even stopped him in the hallways to talk about it. But something about it felt unfinished. He hadn't said everything he had wanted to say, hadn't fully explained the complexity of what he was feeling. He had admitted he was unsure of what he wanted, but hadn't fully owned up to the fact that he had been avoiding the idea of his own future for years. He had spent so much of his life hiding behind his father's shadow, pretending that his family's wealth and success would be enough to define his worth. But now that he had stepped out of that shadow, he realized he had a long road ahead of him. It wasn't just about picking a new path, it was about figuring out who he really was. And the weight of that realization hit him hard. His parents, as supportive as they tried to be, were still pushing him toward the same goals they'd had for him from the start. Stanford, Ivy League, business. Everything he had ever done had been geared toward that trajectory, and now, after his speech and his conversation with Jaden, he knew he couldn't walk that path any longer. But how would he break it to them? How could he say he didn't want the life they'd planned for him? One day, a week after the event, Jaden sat down for another one of his regular meetings with Mrs. Ferguson, his guidance counselor. She had been following his progress closely, both in terms of his academic achievements and his newfound role as an influencer among his peers. The college admissions process was looming on the horizon, and Jaden knew that his future had just gotten a lot more complicated. "You've been doing exceptionally well, Jaden," Mrs. Ferguson said with a warm smile as they sat across from each other in her office. "Your grades, your participation in the STEM event, everything is looking great. You're on track for some serious scholarships." Jaden nodded, feeling the familiar pressure creep back into his chest. He had always wanted to go to college, to prove that he was capable of more than people thought. But now, there was a tension between his ambitions and his desire for a life that felt meaningful, something that went beyond the standard expectations of success. "That's the thing," Jaden said, leaning forward. "I'm not sure what I want anymore. The scholarships, the schools, the programs, they're all great, but I don't want to just go along with what's expected. I want to create something. Something real. But I don't know what that looks like yet." Mrs. Ferguson's smile softened, and she leaned back in her chair. "You're thinking bigger now, Jaden. That's a good thing. But you don't have to have it all figured out right away. You can experiment. Take some time to explore your options." "I've been thinking about that," Jaden said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "But I'm scared that if I don't keep going down this perfect path, I'll lose my shot at something big." Mrs. Ferguson chuckled lightly. "You're not going to lose your shot by choosing a path that's right for you. The world's full of opportunities, but you have to decide which ones are worth your time. Not everything that glitters is gold, Jaden. Just because someone else has mapped out a path for you doesn't mean it's your destiny." Jaden stared at her for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He had spent so long focused on achievement, on winning, on proving everyone wrong. But now, as he sat there, he realized that success didn't have to look the way everyone else expected it to. It could look like him. A few days later, Chase sent Jaden a text that shook him out of his thoughts. "Hey, you got a second?" Jaden's heart skipped a beat. He had thought about Chase often in the past few weeks, especially since their last conversation. They hadn't talked much since then, though they had exchanged a few casual greetings in the hallways. But something about this text felt important. Jaden quickly responded. "Sure. What's up?" Within minutes, Chase showed up at Jaden's doorstep, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie, his expression serious. "Can we talk?" Chase asked, his voice quiet but heavy. "Of course," Jaden said, stepping aside to let him in. They walked to the living room, and Jaden motioned for him to sit. Chase took a deep breath. "I need to ask you something. I've been thinking a lot about everything lately. My family. My future. What I really want. And I think I'm at a crossroads. I don't know if I can keep going down this path they've set for me. It's not who I am. I can't just keep pretending to be someone I'm not." Jaden sat back, considering his words carefully. He understood exactly what Chase was saying. The same fear had kept him up at night, fearing that if he didn't follow the prescribed path, he'd be left behind. But now, in this moment, he saw Chase's vulnerability for what it was, the same uncertainty he had once felt, the same desire for something real. "I get that, man," Jaden said, his voice soft but firm. "I've been there. But you have to take that step. No one's going to give you permission to live your truth. You have to decide it for yourself. And yeah, it's scary. But if you don't, you'll always wonder what could have been." Chase looked at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "But what if I fail? What if I let everyone down?" Jaden shook his head. "Failure isn't the worst thing, Chase. Not trying, that's the real failure." The conversation lasted for hours, and when Chase left Jaden's house that evening, he felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone in his doubts. He had someone who understood. Jaden, too, left the conversation with a sense of clarity. The pressure was still there, but it didn't feel as suffocating. There was more at stake now, but there was also more to be gained. The tipping point had arrived. Both of them were standing on the edge, ready to make a choice that could alter the course of their lives forever. The first step is always the hardest. Jaden had spent the last few weeks reflecting, meditating on his path, and asking himself questions he never dared ask before. The pressure was still there, but it wasn't the same. It had evolved. It had grown into something different. Instead of just struggling with expectations, Jaden was now wrestling with his own desires and the future he was carving out for himself. He knew that the decisions he made in the coming months would shape the rest of his life, whether he was ready for that or not. His parents had started talking about college. It was subtle at first, just small comments during dinner. They mentioned Stanford again, as if it were the only option. They'd been putting pressure on him for years to follow that exact path. Now, as the conversations grew more frequent, Jaden found himself stifling a deep sense of dread. The truth was, the thought of living up to that pressure was overwhelming. Stanford wasn't just a college, it was the place where his whole life had been set up to culminate. But the idea of walking into that perfect life with perfect grades, perfect friends, and perfect success, it didn't fit him anymore. It wasn't his story to tell. Meanwhile, Chase had finally come to a decision of his own. The night after his conversation with Jaden, he stayed up late, scrolling through college websites, reading about potential majors, and trying to imagine himself in any of those future paths. But nothing resonated. Everything felt forced. His father's voice rang in his head. "You'll be great in business. Just follow the plan, Chase." His mother's voice added its chorus, "You're going to be a leader. You're meant for big things, just like us." But Chase wasn't sure if he wanted to be like them. In the end, it wasn't just about choosing a college. It was about breaking free from a life that had already been laid out for him, a life that didn't belong to him. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He couldn't keep living for the approval of others. So, the next morning, he called his parents. He had been dreading the conversation for weeks, but now, the time had come. He was sitting on his bed, the phone pressed to his ear. The words caught in his throat. But he forced them out. "Mom, Dad, I can't go to Stanford. Not the way you want me to. I'm not sure what I want yet, but I can't follow the path you've set out for me. I need to find my own way. I don't want to go into business. I want to do something that matters to me. I don't know what that looks like right now, but I'm not going to do what you want just to make you proud." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Chase braced himself for the backlash. He knew it would come. But instead, his father's voice broke through, quieter than usual. "I understand," his father said. "You've always been your own person, Chase. We'll support whatever path you choose, even if it's not what we expected. Just make sure you don't regret it." And with that, the weight on Chase's chest seemed to lift. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one. He felt free. Later that week, Jaden and Chase met up at a local park, both weighed down by the magnitude of the decisions they'd made. They found a quiet bench near the edge of a small pond, the sunlight dappling through the trees above. There was a calm in the air, a kind of peacefulness that neither of them had experienced in a long time. Jaden broke the silence first. "So, did you really do it?" he asked, his voice teasing but also filled with respect. "Yeah. I called my parents. Told them I wasn't going to follow their plan. I think they're still processing it, but I feel good. Scared, but good." Jaden nodded. He understood that feeling. Scared but free. He felt the same way. He had made the decision to tell his parents he wasn't going to follow the traditional route either. He wasn't going to just sign up for a bunch of scholarships and cruise through school. He wanted to pursue something deeper. Something that would make a real difference. "I'm proud of you," Jaden said after a beat. "You've taken a huge step. I know it's not easy, but I think we're doing the right thing." Chase looked at him and smiled. "It's funny. I thought I'd be terrified by the thought of stepping away from what everyone expects. But it's the first time in my life I feel like I'm actually making a choice that's mine." Jaden grinned. "Yeah, me too. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. But it feels right. For once, it feels like I'm choosing my path, not just what other people think I should do." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything they had shared settling between them. The pressure they had both felt, the need to follow a preordained path, the fear of disappointing everyone around them, was gone. It was liberating. And while they knew the road ahead wouldn't be without challenges, the first step toward freedom had been taken. "I guess we'll figure it out as we go," Chase said finally. "One step at a time." "Yeah," Jaden agreed. "But I think we'll be okay. We're not alone in this." As they stood up from the bench, Jaden felt an unfamiliar sense of lightness. He knew it wouldn't always be easy, that the expectations would still follow him. But in that moment, under the bright sky, with Chase standing beside him, he knew that he had made the right decision. The following weeks passed quickly, and the ripple effect continued to spread. Jaden and Chase started to notice the subtle changes in their relationships with others. Some people who had once dismissed Jaden for being different started to approach him with respect. Others who had been skeptical about his choices now looked at him with admiration. Chase's decision to break free also began to inspire others. Students who had always felt trapped in their own versions of perfect lives began questioning what they really wanted. What did they truly care about? Who were they when no one was watching? It wasn't a dramatic shift, but it was a start. People were waking up to the idea that they didn't have to conform. They didn't have to live in anyone's shadow but their own. And as Jaden and Chase continued to explore their paths, they began to see more clearly, breaking free wasn't just about walking away from old expectations. It was about creating something new. A future that was truly their own. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of Jaden's room, casting a warm glow across his desk. The glow was a small reminder that the world outside was moving, and with it, so was he. Life had changed. And although Jaden had chosen to break free from the conventional path, it wasn't without its share of uncertainties. Ever since his conversation with Chase, he'd been asking himself a lot of tough questions. What did freedom actually mean? Was it just about rejecting the expectations placed upon him, or was there something more? Jaden had decided that it wasn't enough to simply be different. He wanted his choices to mean something. He didn't want to just avoid the future everyone expected of him, he wanted to create a future that would make a real impact. But right now, the future seemed like an abstract idea. A big, mysterious puzzle that he was slowly trying to piece together. A few days after their pivotal conversation at the park, Jaden met up with Chase again, this time at the local coffee shop they often visited when they needed to think. The space was cozy, and the aroma of fresh coffee beans filled the air. It was quiet, just the right setting for important conversations. Jaden walked up to Chase, who was already sitting at a corner table, staring at his phone with a deep concentration. When Jaden sat down, Chase looked up and smiled, but it was a different kind of smile, one that held more thought than usual. "You good?" Jaden asked, his voice casual but searching. Chase sighed, setting his phone down. I'm not sure. It's a lot to handle. You know." Jaden nodded, leaning back in his chair. He knew exactly what Chase meant. The world outside had a way of demanding certainty, an answer, a direction, a label. Jaden had made his choice to break free from the expectations, but it didn't mean the road was clear. "Yeah," Jaden replied thoughtfully. "It's like we stepped out of one cage only to find ourselves in another, but it's one we get to build ourselves, you know." Chase let out a small laugh, nodding slowly. "Yeah, I get that. It's just, I don't know where to start. Everyone's already got their paths laid out. They've been working on their thing for years. And here we are, trying to create something out of nothing." Jaden leaned forward, his eyes narrowing in thought. "But that's the thing, Chase. We don't have to figure it all out now. I mean, think about it, no one really has it all figured out, even if they look like they do. Maybe the key is to just take it one step at a time and be open to whatever comes. That's how we make our own path." Chase absorbed Jaden's words, taking a deep breath. "You're right. It's just hard, man. All this pressure to have an answer. To be something. I'm still not sure what I want to do, but I know one thing, I don't want to be someone I'm not." The conversation drifted into silence as both of them reflected on their words. It was true, the weight of expectation was immense, but the idea of forging a new life based on their own terms was even more powerful. They weren't just breaking free from their family's ambitions. They were also challenging society's need for immediate answers, for solid labels, for clarity. And for the first time, Jaden felt the spark of hope flicker inside him. Maybe the real power wasn't in finding the right answer immediately, but in being able to embrace the uncertainty without fear. Later that day, Jaden found himself at his desk, facing a blank page on his computer screen. The idea of "what's next" loomed large in his mind. He had thought about everything, college, his future, his purpose, but for the first time, he let go of the pressure to have it all figured out. Instead, he decided to just write. He typed a few words, then deleted them. The cursor blinked at him, challenging him to commit, to create something, anything. And then it came to him. "I want to start something real. Something that matters." He didn't know what that meant yet, but he felt the truth in those words. The feeling that he had been chasing all this time, the desire to matter, to make an impact, wasn't about following a path laid out by others. It was about creating something new. Something that was meaningful to him. As he continued to type, Jaden's mind began to clear. The next step wasn't to make a grand plan, it was to begin. He had already started with his choices. Now, it was time to take action. It was time to explore the unknown, one piece at a time. Chase, too, was taking action. That afternoon, he walked into the community center downtown. He had been thinking about his passion for helping others, about the way he had always admired people who gave back to their communities. He had signed up for a volunteer orientation a few weeks ago, and today was the day he was finally going to show up. When he arrived, the center was buzzing with activity. There were people setting up for an event, kids running around, and volunteers moving swiftly from one task to another. Chase felt a strange sense of calm settle over him as he walked up to the front desk and introduced himself. "I'm here for the volunteer orientation," he said, his voice slightly uncertain. The receptionist smiled warmly and handed him a clipboard. "Glad to have you with us. Let me show you around." As they walked through the building, Chase felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in a long time. This was real work, work that mattered. It was a far cry from the business world his parents had envisioned for him, but it felt right. It felt like the beginning of something he could truly be passionate about. By the time evening rolled around, Jaden and Chase were both exhausted, but the exhaustion was different. It wasn't from pushing themselves to conform to others' expectations. It was from stepping into their own lives, creating their own futures. Jaden sat down at his desk, scrolling through the local nonprofits he had been researching. He wasn't sure yet what he could do with this newfound energy, but he felt something stirring inside him. The idea of using his platform, his voice, for good, felt like a powerful possibility. There was so much he could accomplish, so many people he could reach. And then his phone buzzed with a message from Chase. "Hey man, I think I've found something real. I'm excited. I'm actually doing something that feels like it matters." Jaden smiled as he read the text. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone in this journey. They were both taking steps toward their own paths, and although they didn't have it all figured out, they were moving forward, together. As Jaden put his phone down, a new sense of determination settled over him. The future didn't have to be clear right now. It didn't have to be perfect. All he had to do was keep moving, keep exploring, and keep creating. Because that was the beauty of breaking free, it wasn't about finding one set path, it was about having the freedom to choose the next step, and the next one, until eventually, he'd find his way. And even if it took time, he knew now that the journey was the destination. The next few weeks were a blur of decisions, new directions, and quiet moments of self-reflection. Jaden and Chase both began to settle into their new paths, but as they ventured into unfamiliar territory, the ripple effects of their decisions were beginning to spread beyond their own lives. Jaden's phone buzzed one evening while he was flipping through old notebooks, trying to formulate some new ideas for a project he wanted to pursue. The text was from Chase, and as usual, it wasn't just a simple, "Hey." It was a sign that something had happened. "Hey man, I think we're onto something big. Can we meet tomorrow?" Jaden immediately felt a spark of curiosity. Chase hadn't said anything about a big project recently, and now he was calling it big. "Sure, what's up?" Jaden texted back. Chase's reply came almost instantly. "I'll tell you in person. I've been working with the community center on some ideas for a mentorship program. You won't believe who's involved now." Jaden put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. He was intrigued. Chase had always been passionate about helping others, but now, it seemed like he was really getting things off the ground. The next day, they met up at their usual cafe. As soon as Jaden sat down, Chase was already grinning like he couldn't wait to share his news. "What's going on?" Jaden asked, leaning in. Chase's eyes lit up. "You're not going to believe this. We've got a partnership with the local high school, and they're going to let us mentor at-risk students. It's huge, man. They're even going to give us funding for the program." Jaden blinked, stunned. "Wait, really? That's incredible, dude." "I know, right?" Chase said, practically bouncing in his seat. "It's not just about offering tutoring. We're going to have a whole team of people mentoring these kids, helping them figure out their futures, whatever that looks like. No tests, no pressure, just real support. I'm telling you, Jaden, this could change everything." Jaden took a moment to absorb what Chase was saying. This wasn't just about helping a few kids out. This was a shift in how people thought about education, mentorship, and success. Chase was building something tangible, something that could ripple outward and impact entire communities. He was creating change. "That's amazing," Jaden said, his voice filled with admiration. "You're really doing it. You're changing the way people think about success. I'm proud of you." Chase shrugged, a little sheepishly. "It's not just me. I've got a whole team backing me up now, but it feels good, you know. I think we're really making an impact. And it's not even just the kids. Some of the teachers are already talking about expanding it to other schools. This thing is growing." Jaden's mind raced with possibilities. This was exactly the kind of work he had been hoping to find. A way to make a difference without following the traditional paths people expected. But as he thought about it, he realized he was in a different place from Chase. Chase had already found his calling, something concrete. Jaden still wasn't sure what his next step should be, but the ripple effect of Chase's actions made him feel like maybe he was on the right track. "I don't know what's next for me," Jaden said slowly, "but I want to be involved in something like this. This is the kind of change I want to see. I just need to figure out how to get there." Chase grinned. "Trust me, man. It's all about making one choice. And once you make that choice, everything starts falling into place. You're already on your way." Back at the community center, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that something big was happening. He watched as Chase poured his heart into the mentorship program, and it inspired him to reflect on his own future. But while Chase had found his passion, Jaden was still struggling to define his. He had a lot of ideas: social justice, community outreach, arts education, but nothing seemed to fit perfectly. It was as if he was still in the process of molding his identity, like clay on a potter's wheel, waiting for the right form to emerge. The next week, he received an unexpected phone call that would begin to shape the next chapter of his life. The voice on the other end of the line was one he hadn't heard in a while, Ms. Johnson, his former English teacher. "Jaden, hi. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," Ms. Johnson said, her tone warm and friendly. Jaden sat up straighter, surprised. "No, not at all. What's up?" "I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in coming back to the school to help with a new initiative," Ms. Johnson said. "We're starting a community-based storytelling project with our students, and we're looking for mentors. You've got such a unique perspective, and I thought you might be interested in helping out." Jaden felt a spark of excitement. Storytelling. That was something he'd always been drawn to. Not just writing, but sharing stories, elevating voices, and giving people a platform to tell their truth. "That sounds incredible," Jaden said, his heart racing a little. "I'm definitely interested. Tell me more." Ms. Johnson outlined the project. They would work with students to help them craft their own stories, stories of their struggles, triumphs, and everything in between, and showcase those stories to the community. It was about giving students the opportunity to share their own experiences, their own voices, in a way that felt empowering. Jaden was hooked. This was it. This was the kind of work he had been searching for. It was personal, impactful, and aligned with the type of change he wanted to see in the world. He didn't need to know exactly how it would all unfold, he just needed to start. That evening, Jaden found himself on the phone with Chase, excitedly telling him about the opportunity. "I think this is it, man," Jaden said. "This storytelling project could be the beginning of something huge. I'm going to be working with kids, helping them find their voices, just like we've talked about. This is my chance to make an impact." Chase was silent for a moment, then laughed. "I knew you'd find your thing. You've always had a way with words. I'm proud of you, man. I really am." Jaden smiled to himself, feeling a mix of nervousness and exhilaration. He wasn't sure where this new journey would take him, but he was ready. It wasn't about knowing the outcome, it was about taking the first step, just like he had with Chase. And now, with the storytelling project, he was stepping into his own. The ripple effect of their choices had begun. It wasn't just about the mentorship program or Jaden's new project, it was about the way they were beginning to influence those around them, how their actions were encouraging others to take ownership of their lives, to create their own futures. They weren't just breaking free from societal expectations, they were setting off a chain reaction that would spread to others. Each ripple created a new wave, and slowly, they were changing the world in ways they had never imagined. And this was just the beginning. The months since Jaden had started his storytelling project felt like they'd passed in the blink of an eye. What started as a simple way to help students express themselves had turned into something far greater. The program had expanded, and the ripple effect of his efforts was undeniable. Word had spread throughout the community, and now local businesses, non-profit organizations, and even city officials were showing interest. It seemed like the momentum was unstoppable. But with this growing attention came new challenges. One Thursday evening, Jayden sat at his desk, his computer open in front of him. He had just finished a meeting with the school board, and the weight of the conversation lingered in the air. They were discussing funding for his program, and while the response had been overwhelmingly positive, there was a catch. They wanted to turn the project into a formalized, citywide initiative, something that could run in every school district. It was an exciting proposal, but it was also overwhelming. Citywide? That's huge, Jayden murmured to himself, rubbing his temples. He had always dreamed of making a real impact, of changing lives on a larger scale, but now that it was becoming a reality, the sheer responsibility was starting to settle in. What if he couldn't handle it? What if the project grew too fast, too big for him to manage? As his mind raced, he received a message from Chase. "Yo, let's meet up. I've got something I want to talk to you about." Jayden immediately replied, "What's up?" "It's important. You've got time." Jayden felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Chase sounded serious. He wasn't sure if it was the pressure of everything building up, but something about the tone in Chase's text made him uneasy. They met at their usual cafe again, but this time, there was a sense of urgency in the air. Chase was already sitting at a corner booth when Jayden walked in, looking unusually tense. He barely looked up as Jayden slid into the seat across from him. "Everything okay?" Jayden asked, trying to gauge the mood. Chase glanced up at him, his expression guarded. "Yeah, it's just, there's something I need to say, man." Jayden raised an eyebrow. "Okay, what's going on?" Chase took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. "I've been talking to some people. People from the city council, businesses, the media, they're all getting really interested in what we're doing. And that's great, right? It's what we wanted. But..." Jayden's heart skipped a beat. "But what?" Chase's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "I'm starting to feel like they're trying to take over. They don't understand what this is about, Jayden. They see it as a business opportunity, a way to make themselves look good. They want to use our project to boost their image, and they're offering all this funding, all this support, but at what cost?" Jayden sat back in his seat, processing what Chase had said. It wasn't a complete surprise. The reality of his success was beginning to attract all kinds of attention, some genuine, some opportunistic. But hearing it from Chase, someone who had always been on the ground level with him, made it hit harder. "What are you saying?" Jayden asked quietly. "I'm saying that if we let them in too far, if we start prioritizing their agenda over the kids, over the real impact we're trying to make, it could lose everything that made it special in the first place. We're not running a charity, Jayden. This is about creating something real, about lifting people up. But these people don't care about that. They care about the spotlight. And I don't want to be part of that." Jayden felt a pang of guilt wash over him. He had been so focused on making the project grow, on the potential it had to reach more people, that he hadn't stopped to think about the costs of success. Would the essence of what they had built be diluted by the very people who were now knocking on their door? Would they lose their sense of purpose in exchange for money, fame, and recognition? Chase's words were a warning, but they also forced Jayden to confront his own growing fears. What if everything they had built, all the changes they had made in people's lives, were swallowed up by something bigger and more corporate? What if they lost their way? Later that night, Jayden sat alone in his room, staring out the window as the city lights flickered in the distance. His phone buzzed again. It was another message from Ms. Johnson. "Hi Jayden, I just wanted to check in on the project. We've had some media interest, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how we should handle it." His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he thought carefully. Media interest. Funding offers. All of it was coming in faster than he could keep up with. The balance between staying true to his vision and embracing the growth of the project was becoming more complicated than he'd imagined. Every decision felt like it could tip the scale one way or the other. Could he keep the heart of the project intact if it expanded this quickly? Could he ensure that it remained a tool for empowerment and not just another commodity? Jaden's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. He looked up, startled, as his mom stepped in. "Hey, kiddo. You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Jaden smiled at her, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" she asked, sitting down beside him. "It's this project. It's growing so fast. People are noticing it. And I guess I'm just scared that it might get out of my control. That it might lose what it was supposed to be." His mom took a deep breath, her expression serious but comforting. "You can't control everything, Jaden. People will come and go, opportunities will show up when you least expect them. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself why you started this in the first place. If you stay true to your original vision, if you keep the kids and the community at the heart of what you're doing, then no matter how big it gets, it won't lose its meaning." Jaden nodded slowly, taking in her words. The pressure was immense, but his mom was right. He couldn't let fear of the future dictate his choices. He had built something real, and no matter how much it grew, he had to ensure that it always stayed grounded in the principles that had driven him from the start. The next day, Jaden met with Chase again, this time with a clearer mind. "I think we need to put some boundaries in place," Jaden said firmly. "We can't let the project become about the money or the recognition. If we want this to stay true, we need to protect it from all the external pressures. We need to remember what we're doing here." Chase's eyes softened with relief. "I'm glad you see it that way. I was starting to feel like I was the only one who felt this way." Jaden smiled, putting a hand on his friend's shoulder. "We've got this. We just need to stay focused." As they moved forward, Jaden and Chase made a pact, to never lose sight of the real reason they started. They would embrace the growth, but they wouldn't let it consume them. The tipping point wasn't about expanding their reach or gaining fame. It was about staying true to the mission. And with that commitment, they knew they had the power to guide the project in the right direction. But there were still challenges ahead, and the real test was yet to come. Jaden stood at the front of the crowded auditorium, the soft murmur of the audience a constant buzz in the background. The event they had been working toward for months was finally here, the showcase of the storytelling project, the culmination of everything they had worked for. Students would share their stories, their experiences, their truths, and the community would be there to witness it. Jaden could feel the weight of the moment on his shoulders, but there was also an overwhelming sense of pride. This was what it had all been for, the reason he had started, the purpose that had guided every decision. As the lights dimmed and the first student stepped up to the stage, Jaden couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. It felt like a lifetime ago when he had been unsure about his own direction, lost in a sea of doubt and uncertainty. But now, standing in front of a packed room of parents, teachers, and even some of the city's prominent figures, he realized that he had found his purpose. He wasn't just a mentor. He wasn't just an organizer. He was a storyteller, a bridge between voices that needed to be heard and the world that needed to listen. The student on stage began speaking, and Jaden's attention snapped back to the present. The story was raw, emotional, and real. It was a tale of struggle, resilience, and triumph, a story that had been shaped by experiences of hardship, but one that ultimately conveyed hope. Jaden's eyes misted over. This was what it was all about. These kids weren't just telling their stories, they were reclaiming their narratives, reshaping their identities, and empowering themselves. "Wow," Chase whispered from beside him, watching the performance. "I never thought it would feel like this." Jaden nodded, a lump in his throat. "Yeah. This is what we've been working for. All of it. For these moments." The night continued with more students sharing their stories, each one different, yet connected by a common thread of perseverance and hope. It was clear that this program had not only helped them find their voices but had also given them the confidence to stand in front of an audience, to speak their truth, and to be proud of their journey. The next day, the media arrived. The cameras, reporters, and flashing lights were a far cry from the intimate, grassroots nature of the program that had started out in the community center. Jayden felt the shift immediately. The cameras wanted to capture the success of it all, the smiling faces, the tears, the proud moments. It wasn't about the kids anymore. It was about the spectacle. Chase had warned him about this, but now that it was happening, it was hard to ignore. The program was no longer just theirs. It was being absorbed into a larger narrative, one that felt increasingly disconnected from the mission they had started with. Jayden watched as the media representatives interviewed parents and city officials, asking them about the success of the project, about its potential to change the city. They praised the initiative, the impact, the growth, but there was little mention of the kids, their stories, their struggles. Jayden excused himself from the chaos of the press area and found a quiet corner near the back of the auditorium. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Ms. Johnson. "Hey, Jayden. I just wanted to check in. How are you feeling about everything?" He sighed deeply before typing back. "It's been overwhelming. The kids did an amazing job last night, but now it feels like the whole thing's getting away from us. The media, the funding, it's starting to feel like it's more about the attention than the purpose." His phone buzzed again almost instantly. "I get it. It's a lot. But remember what you've always said, the goal was to give them the opportunity to be heard. And now that they've been heard, the next step is making sure their voices are respected. Don't lose sight of what matters most." Jayden leaned back against the wall, staring at the message. Ms. Johnson's words resonated deeply with him. It was easy to get caught up in the noise, the media, the funding, the attention, but at the heart of it all were the students. They were the reason he had started this in the first place. They were the ones who needed to be protected from the external forces that might try to co-opt their voices. With renewed clarity, Jayden stood up and walked back to the main area, where the crowd had grown even larger. Chase was talking to a local business owner, but Jayden knew he needed to talk to him about what was happening. "Chase," Jayden called, walking over to him. Chase turned, a slight frown on his face. "What's up?" Jayden lowered his voice. "We need to be careful. The media, the businesses, they're all jumping in, and it's starting to feel like they're more interested in the story than the kids. This was never about the spotlight, and I'm afraid we're losing sight of that." Chase nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I've been feeling that too. It's all moving so fast. But you're right, we can't let it become a spectacle. The kids are the center of all of this." Jayden took a deep breath. "We need to set some boundaries. Keep the focus on them, on their stories, their growth. And if we're going to accept any external funding or support, we need to make sure it aligns with our values. No more compromises." Chase's face softened with relief. "I'm glad you said that. I was starting to feel like I was the only one holding on to what this was supposed to be about. We've got to protect the heart of it." Over the next few weeks, Jayden and Chase worked tirelessly to regain control of the project's direction. They met with school officials, community leaders, and local businesses, making it clear that while they were grateful for the support, they would not let the program be co-opted. They set boundaries on media access, ensuring that the stories of the kids remained the focus, and that any funding or partnerships would be aligned with the values of empowerment and community. The shift wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations and tough decisions. But as the program continued to grow, Jayden could feel the integrity of the project remaining intact. They were staying true to their original vision, and it was paying off. One evening, months later, Jayden stood on stage once again, but this time, he wasn't just the mentor, he was the one being recognized. The city had awarded him a community leadership honor for his work with the storytelling project. As he took the stage, the applause rang out, but he didn't let it distract him. He was focused on one thing. The students. In the audience, he saw their faces, some of them were smiling, others nervously fidgeting, but all of them were there. This was their moment too. The program had given them a platform to share their truths, and now they were a part of something bigger. The ripple effect that had started with a small community center had now reached the farthest corners of the city, and Jaden knew that it wasn't over. It was just the beginning. When the applause died down, Jaden stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "This honor is not just mine. It belongs to every single student, every mentor, every volunteer who has believed in the power of storytelling and community. We've built something together. And together, we'll keep building." As he spoke, he caught sight of Chase in the audience, his friend giving him a quiet thumbs up. It wasn't the fame or recognition that mattered, it was the impact they had made on those who had trusted them with their stories. Jaden smiled to himself, finally at peace with the path he had chosen. They had come full circle. And this was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?